the Middle East, a region often defined by conflict and division. This is the story of 12 days in September that forever altered its course. It began with a series of explosions in Lebanon, calculated strikes in a larger, more sinister puzzle. It began with a deafening roar that echoed through the streets of Beirut, a city already familiar with the sounds of conflict. Thousands of pages, many belonging to Hezbollah members, detonated simultaneously, creating a wave of destruction that no one saw coming. These everyday devices, once used for simple communication, were transformed into instruments of death, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and broken communities. The human toll was staggering, at least 13 lives extinguished, including innocent children who had no part in the conflict. Families were left grieving, their lives forever changed in an instant. Fingers were quickly pointed at Israel, a country with a long and often controversial history in the region. Accusations flew and the air was thick with tension and suspicion. The sophistication of the attack pointed towards a well-planned and meticulously executed operation. Experts speculated about the advanced technology and strategic planning that must have gone into such a coordinated strike. The pager explosions marked the beginning of a dark chapter in the region's history. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of violence. The city of Beirut, with its rich history and resilient people, now faced yet another challenge in its long struggle for stability and peace. The international community watched in shock and horror as news of the attacks spread. Governments and organizations around the world condemned the violence and called for an immediate investigation. The United Nations held emergency meetings to address the crisis, but the path to justice and resolution seemed uncertain. In the aftermath, protests erupted in cities across the Middle East, with people demanding answers and calling for peace. Community leaders and activists worked tirelessly to rebuild and heal, but the scars of the tragedy would take much longer to mend. As Lebanon reeled from the previous day's attacks, a new wave of terror washed over the nation. Explosions targeting communication devices plunged the nation further into chaos. 14 more lives were lost, adding to the growing list of victims. The attacks seemed designed to cripple communication and paralyze a nation already on edge. The international community struggled to respond to the escalating violence. The Israeli Defense Forces launched a series of airstrikes targeting Hezbollah rocket launchers in southern Lebanon. This marked a significant escalation in the conflict. The strikes on Lebanese soil drew widespread condemnation, with many accusing Israel of using disproportionate force. Hezbollah vowed to retaliate, promising to make Israel pay a heavy price for its aggression. The cycle of violence seemed to be gaining momentum, threatening to spiral out of control. September 20th, a strike in the heart of Beirut. An Israeli airstrike targeted a residential building in a crowded Beirut suburb. 37 souls perished, including entire families. Israel confirmed their responsibility, claiming they had targeted and killed Ibrahim Akil, Hezbollah's military commander. The strike sparked outrage and condemnation, uniting the Lebanese people in their grief and determination to resist Israeli aggression. The attack galvanized the Lebanese, far from breaking their spirit. September 21st, Lebanon's countermove. Lebanese Interior Minister Bassem Malawi announced the uncovering of a vast Israeli spy network. The discovery added a new layer of complexity to the conflict. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force intensified its bombing campaign, striking approximately 400 Hezbollah targets. The humanitarian crisis deepened with each passing hour. September 22nd, night of fire and fury. Hezbollah and Israeli forces engaged in a ferocious exchange of fire. The intensity of the fighting marked a significant escalation in the conflict. International calls for a ceasefire went unheeded. The conflict seemed to have taken on a momentum of its own. September 23rd, flee or face annihilation. This date will forever be etched in the memories of those who lived through it. Israel issued a stark warning to residents of southern Lebanon: flee your homes or face the consequences. The message was clear and unambiguous, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. Tens of thousands of terrified civilians heeded the call, fleeing their homes and villages. Families packed their belongings in haste. Children clung to their parents and the elderly struggled to keep up. The roads were choked with vehicles and people, all desperate to escape the impending doom. Israeli jets unleashed a devastating barrage of over 1,300 airstrikes. The sky was filled with the deafening roar of fighter jets and the ground shook with each explosion. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and the once bustling city was reduced to rubble. The human cost of the offensive was catastrophic, with over 558 confirmed dead. Rescue workers scrambled to pull survivors from the wreckage, but for many it was too late. The streets were littered with the injured and the dead, a grim testament to the brutality of the conflict. The true extent of the carnage remained unknown. Hospitals were overwhelmed with the influx of casualties, and the city's infrastructure lay in ruins. From the air, the scale of the devastation was painfully clear, a stark reminder of the high price of war. September 24th, trapped in a cycle of violence. Southern Lebanon had become a wasteland, yet the fighting raged on. Hezbollah continued to launch rockets into Israel, and Israel responded with more airstrikes. Sadly, Hezbollah ammunitions were kept in residential areas, increasing the civilian death toll. International condemnation rang hollow amidst the deafening roar of explosions. The world watched in horror, seemingly powerless to stop the cycle of violence. September 25th, Tel Aviv under fire. Hezbollah launched a long-range missile that pierced the skies above Tel Aviv. The missile, while intercepted, shattered the illusion of invulnerability in Israel's heartland. Israel responded with a wave of airstrikes, reducing entire city blocks to rubble. The death toll continued to climb, and hospitals struggled to cope with the influx of casualties. The attack on Tel Aviv pushed the conflict into a dangerous new phase. As world leaders gathered in New York for the annual United Nations General Assembly, a glimmer of hope emerged. The United States and France unveiled a 21-day ceasefire plan. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected the ceasefire proposal. The rejection was met with disappointment and frustration from the international community. The glimmer of hope seemed to fade, extinguished by the stubborn flames of conflict. Standing before the United Nations General Assembly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a fiery and defiant address. He painted a picture of Israel as a nation under siege. Netanyahu declared that Israel was winning on multiple fronts and vowed to continue their offensive. A significant number of delegates walked out as Netanyahu began to speak. Netanyahu's speech seemed to further isolate Israel on the world stage. The world awoke to news that Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, was dead. His death sent shockwaves through the region, leaving many to ponder the future of Hezbollah and the broader Middle East. Nasrallah, a figure both revered and reviled, had been a central figure in the region's politics for decades. The Israeli military announced that Nasrallah had been killed in the September 20th airstrike. This announcement came after a series of escalating tensions and confrontations between Israel and Hezbollah. The airstrike, which targeted a high-level meeting, was seen as a significant blow to the organization. The reaction in Lebanon was mixed, with some seeing him as a hero and others as a terrorist. In the streets of Beirut, emotions ran high. Supporters mourned the loss of a leader they believed fought for their rights, while opponents saw his death as a step towards peace and stability. Analysts warned that Nasrallah's death could lead to a dangerous power struggle within Hezbollah. The organization, known for its tight-knit leadership, now faced the challenge of finding a successor who could command the same level of respect and authority. This internal turmoil could weaken Hezbollah's position both domestically and internationally. The Middle East stood at a crossroads, with the death of Nasrallah ushering in a new era of uncertainty. The power vacuum left by his demise could lead to increased instability in an already volatile region. Neighboring countries watched closely, aware that the ripple effects could impact their own security and political landscapes. 12 days that shook the Middle East to its core. The pager blasts, the airstrikes, the rocket attacks, all etched into the collective memory of the region. The death of Hassan Nasrallah has only added to the uncertainty. The path ahead remains uncertain. a perilous journey through a landscape littered with the wreckage of shattered dreams and the enduring hope for a lasting peace.